Welcome back to World War Live. I am your host, Conrad Franz, joined as always by nobody. It's me on World War Live, the solo stream here during Bright Week. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. I hope everybody is enjoying Bright Week, that they're enjoying the feasting. Let me know if you can hear me, if there are any audio problems. I should have it all set up properly with the correct settings to prevent any issues, but I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I know we had a bit of a hiatus, not just of the World War Live stream, but also of World War Now. Of course, we still got our Ether Hour episode in last week with our Q&A, so I hope everybody enjoyed that. All of our paid subscribers, we still made sure to shovel some content in there for you, because, you know, y'all are the ones that keep the lights on here at the proverbial World War Now bunker. But I really hope everyone is enjoying their Bright Week. I hope everyone had an amazing Pascha. I know I certainly did. I am still feeling full. I think I still smell like smoked meats as our parish cooked these huge lambs over a fire for hours and hours until, you know, from the end of Pascha all the way to the Agape Vespers feast we had the following day. So I hope everybody is enjoying the joy of the resurrection. It's good to see everybody in the chat. If you want to get one of your questions answered here in this episode of World War Live, be sure to leave a super chat over here on YouTube. Maybe next week I'll have another option for entropy or another chat thing set up. But for now, we're sticking with the standard YouTube super chat. You know, they take 30%. It's annoying, but we're working with what we can here. I'm good to, if you're on X as well, it's great to see you. We're going to be talking about a few things. Obviously, it's been a little bit because we didn't do a World War Now show this past week either. Between Good Friday, Holy Saturday, there was just no way that Dimitri and I were going to be able to get it done. But we've got some incredible content coming down the pike for all of you loyal listeners. So I hope that you're here strapped in, ready to discuss a few things. Of course, the Pope, he passed away. We're going to be discussing a bit of that, some papal politics. I know we're Orthodox Christians here, but in the realm of World War III, you can't say that the Pope isn't a somewhat relevant character. We're going to be discussing some of the latest news from the Kashmir with this Pakistan-India stuff. We're going to be discussing a few other things. And if I run out of things to yap about over the course of this stream, I'll probably play a little bit more Ethno Guesser, which was always fun. The last stream, you know, I considered maybe taking it down from from YouTube. I got a lot of heat from that one, frankly. Just a white man speaking his mind, of course, but you know, God forbid someone does that. I went off a little bit about the Austin Metcalf situation, you know, spoke my mind, spoke from the heart. You know, it was a heartfelt, you know, exuberant episode. I was maybe giving some hard truths that people might not have been used to, but you know, some people weren't ready for that. I got accused of sounding like I was on the Daily Wire. I was apparently too racist. I was sounding like Ben Shapiro or something. So I don't know what to say, guys. You know, sometimes you just got to tell it how it is. But we're back. Not necessarily going to be a race-related discussion here, an American domestic situation here, but we are going to, what does it say? Only 0.02% of Black people end up becoming murderers. Well, ultimately, 1 in 22 Black people in America will commit murder in their lifetime. So that's something we all need to be aware of. But I'm going to discuss a few things, yap a little bit, and then, you know, I still haven't figured out if I want to answer everybody's super chats at the end or if I want to just bring them up on the screen as they come up. But, you know, this one might have the first super chat I see from our boy Alan Wong. Want to thank our moderators. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, anybody else that comes in. He's the only wrench I'm seeing right now. But everyone behave in the chat so the mods don't have to bully you. You know, I could bully people myself, but I'm trying to focus on running the stream. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Again, if this is your first time tuning in, please subscribe to the World War Now YouTube channel. Obviously, subscribe to us on Substack as well at worldwarnow.co. If you get behind the paywall, you get access not only to, at this point, hundreds of hours of Ether Hour content. You also get access to our monthly Q&A threads, as well as multiple premium channels on the World War Now Discord server. So it's more than worth the $7 a month that people pay. If you want to become a founding member for $200 a year, you get Frankly, I haven't come up with perks for it yet, but you are in a tier above. I know a few people are at that level, and it is greatly appreciated. I really wish Substack would come up with sort of a tip jar mechanism. In the meantime, until they do, I might have to get a buy me a coffee or something else, because I know some people want to keep donating even more than the $7 a month, which is something I would like to facilitate, because of course, we're growing. The show keeps increasing in viewers. We gain paid subscribers and these sorts of things. But things, with the news, it kind of depends on how the cycle is going. We're going to need to keep seeing some growth, because again, I do this for a living. This is my full-time job, and we're going to need to continue to expand. So I appreciate everybody being here. Please share the stream, share the Substack, share everything. Obviously, follow me on X as well at GnomeRad. Follow World War Now at World War Now _. And be sure to subscribe to the Telegram channel, World War Now. Telly, like the video as well. I cannot overstate how important it is to like the videos on YouTube as well as the posts on Substack. You guys are the algorithm, because usually the algorithms are not helping us too much. However, Substack, I want to give them a big shout out. I believe the highest I got, I was 33rd in the rising section of world politics. Please know, conspiratorial numerology, I didn't come up with the number. That was Substack, but very high levels of ranking in the Substack metrics. I believe we are 70th overall on all of Substack for world politics. We're, I think, almost at the same level as places like the Gray Zone, some very well-known political outlets. So want to thank you for supporting me, getting me and Dimitri and World War Now up in these leaderboards. So I greatly appreciate it. Christos Anesti, Christos Voskresi, all, Almasi Khan. I will try to, those are the main ones that I know. So I know I forget the German, I forget the Romanian, but would love to see as many Christ is risens in the chat as possible. That's what it's all about. Again, I hope everybody is basking in the joy of the resurrection. As an Antiochian, I can proudly say we have a break from Wednesday, Friday fasting all the way until Pentecost. So I am very grateful for that. It's time to get back on a more fitness grind with some protein and some meat. But before we answer some super chats, before we talk even about some other papal news, I do want to address, and let's get the screen share going here. I do want to address the situation in Pakistan and India. I don't really know all of the details, of course, right now. However, this is one of those regions that doesn't get discussed as much as others, even though if you go back to some of our earliest posts, the World War Now post that I first made on Substack, as well as my initial World War Now thread, I do discuss India and Pakistan, as well as India and China. And for those that don't know, both India and Pakistan are nuclear states. So in theory, there is always the risk of nuclear exchange when this rising Hindu superpower of India, that is now, of course, the most populous country in the world, of course, with Pakistan, one of the largest Muslim countries with a huge population. What is it? 150, almost, maybe over 200 million, I think, for Pakistan. But this latest attack is in the Kashmir region, which, for those that don't know, it's up in the northwest corner of India, where it borders with Pakistan, and China is in there as well. And it's a hotly disputed region. Of course, the history of Pakistan and India, Pakistan and Bangladesh are Muslim India. India was, still India. But I'm going to read some details here from Newsweek. It says Pakistan-backed assailants from the Lashkar-e-Taiba offshoot of the Resistance Front ambushed a group of tourists at the remote meadow, opening fire and killing at least 26 people, mostly vacationing Hindu pilgrims and tourists. Around 20 others were injured as gunmen sprayed bullets at unarmed men, women, and children. Survivors said the assailants continued firing for as long as 15 to 20 minutes, then melted away into the surrounding pine forests using narrow hill trails before security forces could reach the roadless site. U.S. President Donald Trump issued a statement condemning the attack. In his message, he expressed, hold on, gotta mute my notifications here until the end of this evening. The statement was shared on his social media. In this message, he expressed solidarity with India and extended condolences to the victims. The statement was shared on his local social media platform, Truth Social. Deeply disturbing news out of Kashmir. The United States stands strong with India against terrorism. We pray for the souls of those lost and for the recovery of the injured. Prime Minister Modi and the incredible people of India, Trump wrote. Biceron, often called mini Switzerland by locals, is a popular meadow ringed by dense pine forests and snow-capped peaks, accessible only on foot or horseback. On any spring day, hundreds of tourists flock there for its tranquility. That was shattered around 2:30 p.m. when assailants emerged from the woods and began riddling picnic spots with gunfire. It may look like Switzerland. I can think of a few reasons why a border region between India and Pakistan isn't exactly like real Switzerland, but I digress. We heard what sounded like firecrackers and people started screaming and dropping, said a local pony handler. Oh, interesting. It talks all about the chaos. I'm sure it was terrifying. Terrorism is obviously, I hope I never get caught in a terrorist attack. But, we see women and children were killed. We heard that, they were letting people live and saying that we're letting you live so that you can deliver this message to Modi, all these sorts of things. And of course, not only is this becoming, this is an age-old geopolitical issue, much like Cyprus, much like, of course, all over the Levant in the Middle East. Kashmir, is one of these perpetual hot zones. It is disputed. Pakistan considers it Indian occupied territory. There are regions that India considers to be occupied by Pakistan. I believe there are even places that China has claims to. I should have pulled up a better map before I went live here. But I think one of the things that, and I'm sure others have already pontificated on this, but one of the main reasons why this is probably going to become a bigger deal than other terrorist attacks happen all the time. There are all sorts of terrorist attacks where 20, 30 plus people will die, and within a week, the news cycle will move on. But in this situation, I wouldn't be surprised if it is sort of used as this kind of return even to the Middle East, because India, of course, a very close ally of Israel. You'll see online how eager Indians are to defend Israelis and defend the genocide in Gaza, largely because they hate Muslims. And why do Indians hate Muslims? Because obviously, there were large-scale Islamic genocides of Hindus. There have been Hindu genocides of Muslims across the subcontinent, and Pakistan in particular, being India's number one geopolitical enemy, is a very Islamic state, and like I said, one of the largest Islamic countries, and it's always been sort of a hotbed for terrorism. All sorts of international groups have set up shop there. Of course, we know, what was it? Osama bin Laden supposedly was killed in Pakistan. But again, the fact that both of these countries have conducted successful nuclear tests and, have the bomb, as it were, it's very much relevant. But I think Pakistan, of course, which obviously generally stood with Gaza, despite the fact that Imran Khan, who was their popular democratically elected leader, sort of like their Trump figure, he unfortunately was basically prevented from being the leader of Pakistan by pretty large-scale Western interference. And even then, the new Western-backed government still, of course, due to the Islamic population and their interactions with other Islamic countries, they obviously strongly stood with Palestine. So in many ways, India-Pakistan conflict will be another proxy for, the Islamic world versus Israel, the Islamic world versus the West. But again, we also have to recognize that Pakistan is one of the most powerful intelligence states. They have the ISI, which is, again, for being sort of a backwards Islamic country, it's a very powerful international intelligence group. I think, I can't remember exactly, a lot of people have said it's like an MI6 carve out, but they have intelligence capabilities. Obviously, they have to because of the nature of their nuclear programs. But the fact that a country like Pakistan is able to have weaponized nukes, but the West wants to cripple even Iran's civilian nuclear capabilities, it proves that it's not really this cut and dry, we got to prevent these rogue states. Because in a lot of ways, if it wasn't for the fact that they threatened Israel so strongly and was so sanctioned by the West because of it, it'd be hard to describe Pakistan as necessarily more stable than Iran. Pakistan, the amount of unrest that occurred when Imran Khan, it was sort of like if J6 had gone on way further. He was literally being protected from national arrest warrants, the military trying to arrest him by his own supporters. His supporters just surrounded him at all times and protected him from persecution for a very long period of time. So this idea that, the only states that are nuclear are these stable democracies. Look at India, 1.6 billion people, so much rape, so much pooping in the street and in the river, and they literally worship demons. It's I understand I'm not in favor of nuclear proliferation for obvious reasons, but I'm skeptical of the whole thing. But in many ways, mutually assured destruction is obviously a very powerful tool of the unipolar moment and the kind of current situation the West operates under. But Speaking of the subcontinent, speaking of Hinduism, we got $10 from Alan Wong. Thank you, Alan. We really appreciate it. He says, do you think there is an emerging caste system in the Western world with the increased presence of Hindian cults of worship, New Ageism, etc.? Well, in many ways, and Scott Greer's talked about this, and I don't agree with Scott Greer on a lot of things these days, but the reality is the elites, we already see a strong elite emerging in the tech elite world, where there's a lot of intermarriage between Asians and whites, Indians and whites. Of course, we see J.D. Vance and his Indian wife. They've been traveling around India recently, visiting temples and whatnot. Of course, J.D. Vance was also the last person to publicly be seen with Pope Francis. So perhaps Vance is becoming a religiously relevant figure, for better or for worse. But outside of even just a new caste system emerging, which, I wouldn't be surprised if the new, post-tech bubble elites do have a sort of half European, half East slash East Asian slash subcontinental sort of flavor to them. Will be this sort of new sect, new caste of people, I guess you could say. More than that, we're just seeing the amount. I mean, Canada is cooked as far as Indian and Hindu and Sikh immigration goes. In Texas, where I'm at, of course, there's all the stuff about Epic City, the East Plano Islamic city, as well as it was in Sugar Land, that huge Hanuman statue, which I believe is the fourth tallest statue in the United States. Statue of the Hindu monkey god Hanuman, which, again, I'm no expert on Hindu theology or history or literature. I did read sections of the Bhagavad Gita in college for studies. And look, there's some value there, right? I'm not going to say that it's just a literally evil demon worship. There's some systems to it, but it is demon worship, and it is, sort of pantheistic, sort of, it's, obviously they say, oh, Hindus will claim they're monotheists as well, whereas, they'll claim that all the gods and all these things are just different manifestations of, the one or whatever it is. But unfortunately, there's nothing we can really do in the West about these big Islamic and Hindu centers that are being developed, because let me see if I can look up this Hanuman statue. Yeah. Sugarland area Hindu temple, now home to third largest statue. Third largest? Good grief. Look at this thing. Terrifying. Let me see. Can I make this bigger? Yeah. Look at this. It's a straight up monkey with, it looks like a swinging censer of some kind or something. There's a squirrel. But yeah, it's in Fort Bend County, third largest statue in the United States. The Sri Ashtalakshmi Temple, dedicated to the 90-foot, 90-ton Statue of Union earlier this month. The statue depicts Hanuman, a Hindu deity who helped rescue the kidnapped wife of Rama, another deity. I remember reading this story. It's kind of like a kid's show. It's like this guy, this based priest, teams up with this monkey man that can grow in size, and then they save the princess. It's pretty cool. It's like Indian Mario or something. But I remember, I think there's like a Phineas and Ferb episode where they all get superpowers, and Balshi becomes Hanuman Man and can like grow in size, and he kind of looks like a monkey. I feel like people would. I'm surprised no one got offended by that, but that was my first exposure to Hanuman, and they're talking all about the numerical symbology of this, and why it looks like a monkey and whatnot. It is really Hanuman's blessings to the public or to all the devotees. While the temple has a Sugarland address, it is located in the extraterritorial jurisdiction of Houston, meaning the latter was responsible for issuing permits. And again, I remember when it came to Epic City, for example, they were talking about having the city be under Sharia law, and Greg Abbott was like, we're going to stop this from happening. But like, what are you going to do? You can't stop them from getting permits. You can't stop them from doing these sorts of things, because if you claim that you can, if you claim to stop someone from building this statue because it's from like some false religion, I mean, obviously, unfortunately, in America, we have enshrined religious freedom, despite the fact that, I mean, look, the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, when they enshrined religious freedom in America, they were talking about inter-Christian religious freedom, which being like that Catholics or Protestants wouldn't gain the whip hand over the other one, that, Unitarians and Trinitarians wouldn't oppress each other, that, Congregationalists, Presbyterians, random new other cults that may or may not emerge, they would, that they wouldn't be using the state to persecute each other. However, I don't think that they meant for huge amounts of mosques to be being built, and people will cite examples of slaves that were Muslims in the early days being given Qurans. I'm forgetting the details of some of these early uh, markers of jurisprudence in the United States, but obviously the founding fathers who, carved out voting rights for white landowning males and had the first immigration acts all be only upstanding white men of good character, which largely meant Christian. They would not. They would look at this and be like, okay, we need to put in some caveats here if this is how people are going to interpret it. But they didn't, and here we are. So that is that's sort of the situation we're in on that. But well, someone asks, Conrad, will you fill in the map for the countries and what side they will side on in World War III tonight? I didn't prepare that for tonight. Maybe I'll do that next week. Maybe I'll be even more inclined to do it next week if someone sends a super chat. But I would like to do that. I'll set up the map and go through it. It's a fun thing to do. But the other thing about that is I do that, and then things start happening and people clip it and they're like, look at this idiot. Look what this idiot thought Burkina Faso would do. Look what this imbecile thought Aruba would do in World War III. It's like, okay, I can't predict every country, but I think it's a fun exercise. And I think specifically with Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia, I think it's pretty interesting to see and speculate on who's going to do what. But I don't see any other questions or super chats about what's going on with the whole India stuff. I think the terrorist attack is let's share this here for a sec. The terrorist attack is something that we're going to keep hearing more about. A lot of world leaders, Putin issued his condolences, of course. Putin and Russia and India have very close relations. I don't know how Russia-Pakistani relations are, but of course, the Pakistan terrorism thing definitely affects Russia and Iran's relationship, because Iran has a large territory in the Balochistan region, Baluchistan, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's this region that borders Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, kind of like Kashmir. And there's huge terrorist clashes there, of course, between Iran and the Pakistanis on different sides, funding different groups. The Israelis, of course, very much fund the ISIS-K and ISIS Balochistan sort of carve-outs that exist there. They use them to destabilize Iran. And I think, as we, of course, discuss the potential of these clashes amongst these nuclear states, we're hearing news that Israel, despite the fact that Trump very much made it clear that he didn't want to help, he didn't want to strike Iran, the Israelis are apparently coming out with plans to strike the Iranian nuclear capabilities without the help of the United States, which, again, I think we're very much in a period where we can, and I'm not trying to ruin the prophecy by saying this, but what does it says? Elder Theodore Agiofarangides, he said, you'll be drinking your morning coffee and you'll see that the Jews struck the Iranian nuclear capabilities. And that's something that if the United States was not privy to it or not involved in the strike, it would come very much more as a surprise. Whereas if the US knew they were going to be involved, they would obviously be seeding things in the media, making it to the point where making it seem as if, sort of setting the stage, making it more palatable to people, reporting on stories that would make them more sympathetic to the US-Israeli cause if a strike were to occur. We have a super chat from To The Chickens, $20. Thank you, sir. Think you can reach out to What If Alt Hist and war game that out? That kind of thing is right up his alley. Didn't he say that his mom raped him and he talks to Odin? I'm not trying to cause controversy here, and if you're a fan of What If Alt Hist no disrespect. I think he's made some good videos. I can't say I've watched that many of them, but I do remember the 10-hour generational crash out where he talks about astral projecting and how he killed God and he is God, or the gods gave him information and him and his mom were doing weird stuff. So I don't know, maybe, but he seems a little unstable. But maybe if he's got a big channel, maybe if he yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to break the news for you. He deleted the videos, but he's I think he's an insane person. Even if, insane people do some great stuff, but he did claim to communicate with Odin and engage in sexual rapture and other sorts of strange things. But I think you would enjoy the future map stream that I probably will do next week, unless there's something else that comes up that is very fitting for this type of medium. But yeah, I think we got some haters in the chat, of course. Honestly, I'm realizing how great it would be if how terrible, how good it is that there are haters in the chat. It means that we are doing the right thing. Of course, another person, I removed them talking about how I don't belong in the Orthodox Church. But I have many enemies, I guess. I know many people that have disagreements with me. And to all leftists, to all communists, to all modernists, ecumenists, I don't think you don't belong in the Orthodox Church. You do belong in the Orthodox Church. You may be wrong. Your perspectives may not align with tradition, and I think you should change your mind. But you definitely do belong in the Orthodox Church, because everyone belongs in the Orthodox Church, especially people that I think are wrong, because we're a better place to be to learn what is right, right? We got some praise, though, on one boy, Paisios. I want to say thank you very much to what you do. I don't think I would be so happy as an Orthodox Christian. Every time I hear about the prophecies, I'm so happy. Thank you, Paisios. And that is so true. The prophecies, again, I know there are some scary ones. We try not to harp on them about famine and plague, but frankly, in a nothing ever happens world, I think a lot of people are frankly ready for some of that stuff. That being said, not saying that it's going to be good. I pray for it to not happen, but the prophecies say that there will be ecumenical councils, that people will be brought to the church. They will say that there will be a renaissance of orthodoxy preached to all four corners of the globe. So I certainly don't see it as any reason to black pill. But, everyone, please keep me in your prayers. People, there are people who want to see me stop doing what I'm doing. So between your super chats, between your support getting behind the paywall at worldwarnow.co, that is what keeps me able to do all of this, because I don't have to work a secular job. Where, imagine if I had, a normal boss, coming up to me at my desk saying, "Oh, I got this email from these angry people online saying that you're talking about this, that, or the other." That would mean I couldn't spit the facts, spit the truth that I like to bring to you here as often. So I appreciate the support, everybody. But now that we're done sort of talking about India, Pakistan, I'm keeping an eye on the news, obviously, as this is going, because there's always stuff going on. We've got, Ansar Allah, striking Haifa, all these sorts of things, launching missiles. Houthis continuing to do what they're doing. So if breaking news happens while I'm on the stream, I will be sure to find it. However, I'm going to share the screen now, and we're going to start talking a little bit about... Stupid thing wouldn't actually show in browser, so I'm going to have to share a different section and get the Telegram up. Give me 1 second here. We're going to talk about the Pope situation. And of course, we know this is an Orthodox show. I'm not Roman Catholic. I am not even... hold on. I'm not even an expert on this Catholic kind of stuff. I know a little bit, more than the average bear. I've been to Vatican City twice. I've had a private tour of the Sistine Chapel. I've been to a lot of the Vatican museums. I think Rome is a beautiful city. I love Rome. I could live in Rome. Rome is a beautiful place. I encourage everybody to visit Rome. Visit the Vatican. It's a beautiful place. I used to, a bit of a, I wouldn't say embarrassing, but some OG Conrad lore. Before I became Orthodox, I would wear a cross around my neck that I bought at the Vatican. Because despite the fact that I was Protestant, I was not one of these anti-Catholic Protestants. I thought Catholicism and Orthodoxy were cool. I guess you could say I was the ultimate Protestant ecumenist. I thought, as long as you were Trinitarian and not gay, that you were a Christian. And I considered Catholicism part of my Western heritage or whatever the hell that means. But now that I'm Orthodox, I feel like I can comment on the papal situation truly objectively. Because look, a lot of discourse online the past week since Pope Francis died. Everyone's talking past each other. We got people talking about how, we got to wish the Catholics the best. We got to pray for Pope Francis's soul. We got to hope he repents. We got to pray that, he can make it into heaven. And I agree with all of that. But at the same time, not only was Pope Francis obviously a heretic, obviously somebody who even within the Catholic world stoked a lot of tension, somebody that within Western civilization did not assist in its preservation. Of course, I consider him a fairly guilty party when it comes to the Great Replacement and migration and the violence that's been wrought on European civilization due to mass migration. But at the same time, as Jay Dyer posted, rest in peace, Pope Francis, greatest Orthodox evangelist of our time. And people apparently didn't like this. They said, this is disrespectful. You're an embarrassment to Orthodox Christians. People quote tweeting Jay, piety signaling, all these sorts of things. And at the end of the day, it wasn't even that offensive. You're still saying rest in peace. You're just saying that a lot of people are recognizing the obvious fact that Pope Francis and his antics led to a lot of Catholics reconsidering their faith and becoming Orthodox. And I think people just kind of need to let it go. At a certain level as well, the Pope is like, yes, he's a real person. We should pray for him. But like, the Pope is kind of like the ultimate meme. Like, he's this figure that, he's a head of state. He's part of this multinational organization, the largest conglomerate of self-described Christians in the world. And I mean, so many people within the Catholic Church, they make jokes. They call his car the Pope Mobile. Like, you got to understand that Orthodox people were going to have some fun. And of course, I posted, someone had posted a picture of claiming that Cardinal Turkson, who's the African from Ghana, and Cardinal Tagle, who is supposedly the Asian Francis, he's the cardinal from the Philippines. And I posted it, what if the Pope were black or Chinese? I thought it was funny. And no one really hated on that one. I thought it was lighthearted. It was funny. I also posted about potential Pope Brandon, Pope Joe Biden. So that could be, I don't know, like any Catholic can become the Pope, right? Like only, the 135 cardinals can vote, 83 of which were appointed by Pope Francis himself. But even though most of the time they vote and pick someone from among their ranks, technically any Catholic could become the Pope. And that includes Mel Gibson, Joe Biden, Nick Fuentes, Tim Gordon, Taylor Marshall. What if Taylor Marshall became the Pope, guys? That'd be cool. I like Taylor Marshall. Let the record show. I'm a Taylor Marshall respecter. I'm going to be watching a lot of Taylor Marshall this week as he breaks down what's going on with the Pope. And for some reason, I've always maintained that I think Taylor Marshall will end up becoming Orthodox. And I don't say that because I think he's a kind of a cynical trad seeker. I think he's an honest guy. I think Taylor Marshall actually cares about the truth in some capacity. And I say that as someone who has made jokes at his expense about his milkers' visions and these other sorts of things. But I think the Pope Francis situation, as Orthodox, we can recognize that in many ways he did a lot of good for us. But at the same time, his ecumenism is dangerous for us as well. And I think that we need to be aware when we're looking at the potential for these new popes about, again, I'm just going to be blunt here. For Orthodoxy, the best case scenario would be for Cardinal Zuppi or one of the hyper progressives to become the Pope. Because it would be, a lot of people have been gritting their teeth through the Francis pontificate, thinking they're going to get Cardinal Sarah, thinking they might get Erdo, thinking they might get someone just a little better, maybe like a Pizza Balla or something, just thinking, yeah, we can get back to caring about the faith here. But if they get a Francis 2.0 or someone even more progressive, I think that's going to make a lot of people realize how deep the institutional rot is that somebody like Francis was able to appoint 83 out of 135 of the cardinal electors, how the seminary system, again, outside of the certain areas that have been turned into a gay mafia, have just been baked to the point where the only people that are going to be rising through the ranks of this institution are people that are more loyal to the preservation of the current institution in its current state, as opposed to the preservation of what a lot of Catholics would perceive as true Roman Catholic tradition. But I want to go through this list from the Thermopylae Telegram channel, because I think I've looked at a lot of different lists from the AP and from Newsweek about who the likely successors are. So we're going to break, and I think this list is the best. But we got $5 from Zach Flatten. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. You're a hero. He says, I think it could very well be only Jesuits in Rome from here. On a related note, any theories on why Benedict retired? Pretty rare for a pope to do so. And the Jesuit thing, I don't know all the details about how many of these cardinals are Jesuits. Pope Francis was the first Jesuit pope, which that sort of said it all. A lot of people pretty easily predicted that the Pope Francis pontificate would go this way because of course, his Jesuit background. But as far as Benedict retiring, I couldn't say. I've listened to some Taylor Marshall on the issue. I've read some things from Popehead and some other people, some sedevacantists, SSPX, traditional Catholics who I find interesting. And I think there was definitely an aspect of being forced out. Some people say his life was threatened. And I think there's some angles that people might think that they told Benedict that they would perhaps implicate him less in some of these McCarrick disputes or some of these other abuse scandals that did occur under his and John Paul II's pontificate. I think he was perhaps a bit spooked by how, look, and I'm not accusing Benedict of being a molester or even necessarily directly covering up for child abuse, but I think he might have been so ashamed by perhaps his oversight or his lack of direct involvement in stopping some of these things that are really, really horrible institutional crimes that, again, we could get into the whole priestly celibacy thing in Roman Catholicism and how that turned them into an institution ripe for this sort of homosexual infiltration that, again, Orthodoxy, any community is not immune from this. Look at Metropolitan Hilarion Alfeyev, who, as far as I can tell, had a gay Asian rent boy. I'm not making direct accusations. That's for the canonical courts and things to decide. But ultimately, he was asked to resign from the episcopacy. He's serving in the Czech Republic now, despite at one point being Patriarch Kirill's second in command. So I'm not, throwing stones where it's not relevant here. But at the end of the day, look how it was handled. It was handled pretty swiftly. He was not leading some ring. And the only reason that I'm not super sympathetic to him claiming that it was fake is because, for example, it was a little Japanese Asian subdeacon that was living with him that, look, there's a picture of the kid like laying on his chest and they're in bed together on a computer. So like, even if they weren't doing anything that weird, the relationship was inappropriate. And the reason I think that it is what you could assume is because I saw Hilarion Alfeyev. I heard him give a homily at St. Nicholas Antiochian Cathedral in Brooklyn, New York. And when he was there, and this was before the kid that made the accusations against him started living with him, he had another, in my opinion, very similar looking Asian subdeacon that was traveling with him. So I thought, so far as I could tell, it seemed like he had a type. But let's stop talking about that and let's discuss this list. Sorry, my Telegram window got all cooked. Give me a second. Someone asked me, you were in New York. Yes, I went to college in New York. I went to the King's College in downtown Manhattan, and I lived in downtown Brooklyn for a year. Why does this keep happening? I'm about to have a freaking rage quit moment here. Give me a second. Okay. If I can make this bigger. No, it doesn't really matter. But, okay, whatever. I went to the King's College in New York City, and I lived in downtown Brooklyn. I lived 5 minutes from the Antiochian Cathedral of St. Nicholas. And I never went. I only went after I moved out of that apartment. So stupid me for not taking advantage of that. But putting that aside, let's go through this. Actually, hold on. Before I do, well, maybe I'll talk about that in a second. I want to get through this first. So Thermopylae says, with considerable speculation taking place around Francis' health, here are the runners and riders for the next papal conclave. And there are one or two people that might be more relevant that aren't on this list, but I think this is a pretty solid list. And so starting off, he has Cardinal Tagle, which is described as a liberal ex-archbishop of Manila, seen as the Asian Francis, supports Rome's stance on LGBT and divorced couples. And for a long time, I thought this guy, kind of leading up to this, I thought he was one of the top contenders. I thought I could see all the Francis people coalescing around him. Of course, he's non-white, he's Asian, and he's of the Francis mold, so I could see how it would work. But I was watching Taylor Marshall earlier, and he was talking about how Tagle, people don't take him seriously. He does weird dances in public. He's kind of a joke, not as serious. And then there's a few other options that seem to kind of fill the... oh my gosh. I'm not going to put that on the screen, Evan, but I will pray for you, man. I'm sorry about that. Lord have mercy. But with Tagle, he having the first Asian pope, obviously that would be, Pope Francis was the first South American pope, despite being ethnically Italian. Having an Asian pope could be relevant. Of course, there's the whole dispute about the China deal. I don't know all the details, but Cardinal Parolin and Pope Francis made this whole deal with the CCP about the church in China and how certain, I guess, bishops need to be appointed or approved by the Chinese Communist Party. I'm not making any judgment calls there, but I think him being the Pope might expedite some of that. Next on this list, they have Cardinal Erdo, who is the conservative, who's conservative. He's the chief bishop of Hungary. He supports Orban, and he's spoken out against Francis over migration, divorce. So he's much more conservative. I hear that he's very much a theologian. He's more of a scholar, whereas these other guys, Tagle, I don't think he's ever considered much of a scholar. Erdo, I don't think it's very likely that he becomes the Pope. He might be the most likely out of a true conservative to become the Pope. I think he's more likely than Cardinal Sarah, who we're going to get to in a second here. But I think, Tagle being from the Philippines, now Erdo from Hungary, both these countries are relatively relevant geopolitically. And I think it's interesting. I think it must just be a cultural thing. It's interesting that Erdo, supported Orban in Hungary. I could have, if there was a more liberal bishop there, that would have been a big dispute with him, always probably critiquing what Orban is doing. But Orban's like a Calvinist, I think, or like an evangelical or something like that. He's not even Catholic. So that they have a good relationship is, of course, interesting. But the situation with Erdo, I don't think it's very likely. I know there's papal rules. If you're Roman Catholic, you can't bet on the next pope, but I'm Orthodox. So, maybe I'm going to get a few parlays going. Just kidding. I don't really gamble. I think gambling is probably a sin. I think games of chance in general are pretty dubious, but I don't know. I think it'd be kind of fun to bet on the Pope, but, some people might get offended by that. But up next, we've got Cardinal Turkson, who they say here is conservative, been in Rome since 2009, so he has an inside advantage. I heard other people saying he wasn't that conservative, so maybe I'll trust this, but he's black. He's one of the bishops of Ghana. I don't know if he's still retired, but he's, I guess, been a Roman insider for a long time. I think in many ways, he's more likely than Cardinal Sarah as well, if we're going to get an African pope. In general, the African cardinals are a lot more conservative than a lot of others. I don't think the African cardinals are the most conservative. I think, Cardinal Burke, Athanasius Schneider, some of these other people are more, they're more conservative than any Africans, but on average, the Africans are generally fairly conservative. Then we got Cardinal Sarah, the long-standing hope of traditionalists, known for support of the Latin Mass and staunch criticism of the current pope. It says over 80, so he can't vote. Pretty sure he's 79. So if the conclave is held here in the next few weeks, I think Cardinal Sarah will be able to vote. So we'll see. I think this list was even made before the Pope died. Paisio said, imagine if we got a Greek bishop of the Pope, that would be hilarious. There are, the youngest cardinal is like a Ukrainian uniate. and there was people wanting to make him the Pope. So that would be pretty. I don't know what that would be. Funny, scary, antichristy, maybe. I've always said that Ukraine is very likely, if it doesn't wrap up, or if the schism there with the schismatics that the EP supports doesn't wrap up, could be a very dangerous situation for the potential false union. Which again, all people were like, remember everyone talking about the false union this year for Easter and how nothing happened? Well, first of all, I'm grateful nothing happened, but also, let's be honest, the Pope has clearly been dying for the past month. How would they have done what they wanted to do with the Pope clearly incapacitated? I'm not even sure the Pope died on Bright Monday. He probably died on Easter. But they probably didn't want to announce that the Pope died on Easter. They probably didn't want to announce that the Pope died on Holy Saturday, whenever he actually died. That being said, I think even in Catholic and Orthodox churches, it's generally a good thing to die around Pascha, right? So I think that's I don't think it's that scandalous, but I could see why they wouldn't want to announce him dying on Easter. But Cardinal Sarah, I don't think it's happening, man. Like, he's more likely maybe than other traditionalists, because maybe everyone's like, oh, he's already 80 years old. He'll have like a 5-year pontificate, and then we can go back to business as usual. We can assuage, this trad revolt, whatnot. But I mean, if Cardinal Sarah got in, he would obviously reinstitute the private right of priests to serve the traditional Latin Mass. He would likely curb the synod on synodality. One thing, I can't see any of these traditionalists softening any of the stuff with the uniates. I don't know anybody that's like anti-uniate these days. If anything, the liberals think the uniates are cool because it's ecumenism and different rights and stuff. And then the traditionalists think uniates are cool because on average, uniates and these Eastern Europeans and Greeks are more are more conservative than the average Western European and South American goobers that they have, pushing all this clown mass stuff. So I'm not super confident that Cardinal Sarah is going to become, obviously, like, that's what Taylor Marshall wants. That's what most people want. It also says a lot that, like, the only actual hope people have for a traditionalist is like a black guy. It's like being white and traditionalist. It's just too much. Like, it's just too much to ask. That's just not, we've moved beyond that, apparently, here in papal politics. But moving on from Cardinal Sarah, we've got the man who is likely the front runner right now. I saw some things giving him a 34% chance, which was much above I think they'd even, some Polymarket had given Tagle 20-something, but they gave Cardinal Parolin 34%. I don't know if that's still happening, but Parolin is the Vatican Secretary of State, seen as Francis's number 2. He'd be the first Italian to sit in St. Peter's since John Paul I. Little is really known about his personal beliefs. Everyone keeps talking about how we need to return to an Italian Pope. Pope Francis was Italian. He's just from Argentina and spoke Spanish. But I see what they're saying. Obviously, Italian would be, people would want to return to this. Because again, you had John Paul II from Poland, you had Benedict from Germany, and you had Francis from Argentina. So Parolin would be, I think, the ultimate Francis 2.0 candidate. Maybe a little more prudent than someone like Tagle, but he would very much be continuing business as usual. He's a diplomat. He's a politician. He's been involved in some pretty important geopolitical realities in the history of the Catholic Church recently. Again, he's the Vatican Secretary of State, so in many ways, he's, at least in Vatican City itself, he's definitely currently in charge as Pope Francis is reposed. But in many ways, I mean, this is the guy, Taylor Marshall, every day this week is doing live streams about the candidates, and he's the first one that he chose. Again, he seems as the most likely, but we have to remember that I think when the first lists came out after Benedict retired, Francis, known as Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio at the time, he was like 15th in the running for Pope. So what happens a lot is there's all this discourse about these top 7, 8, 9, 10 guys, and they end up sort of getting filtered because of all the things. These are more public characters. People know more about them. There's controversy on both sides. And so very likely what often happens is some of these second tier people that maybe one of the people on this list is on that, maybe this Utrecht Stockholm character. Some of these, Dutch or Norwegian characters might emerge. But as far as Parolin, he's obviously the front runner right now. But again, that isn't always, that's not always that's not always the best position to be in at the beginning of these early conclave discussions. But yeah, people are asking in the chat about SSPX. If we get a traditional pope, will they come back into the fold? Who knows? Obviously, everybody likes to call Orthodox sectarian, but at the end of the day, the Orthodox Church has a structure for national churches and for different national churches to be in communion with one another. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church has to be this supranational entity. And now, of course, the Germans are very much, there's pretty much a low-level schism in the church over the Germans. They love blessing gays and doing all sorts of nonsense. The German church, very liberal, despite the fact that, who is it, Schanborn? There's a few German bishops that are traditional, but the vast majority of the synod in Germany is very, very progressive in the Roman Catholic Church. And that gets us to the next guy on this list, Cardinal Zuppi. And it says, arguably the most liberal candidate, close collaborator with American leftist pro-gay and anti-Trump priest James Martin, allegedly blessed a gay wedding per conservative Catholic media in Italy. So this guy is sort of the worst nightmare of your Taylor Marshall types, of your trad types, of your traditional Latin Mass enjoyers, of your non-sodomy enjoyers. This guy is your worst nightmare. And he's not as likely, some of these other characters like Parolin, Turkson, even Pizzaballa maybe, but a lot of the polling and betting stuff that I saw had him well above Cardinal Sarah, had him well above people like Erdo. So he's not someone to overlook. I think in many ways the conclave would be foolish. I think the moderate liberal swing votes that are considering where they're going to vote, I think they're writing this guy off as well. They realize that there's already a bit of a revolt. I'm sure the SSPX is growing. Sedevacantist groups are growing. Obviously, Orthodoxy is growing with converts from Roman Catholicism. So I think to stem some of that, they're not going to go with Zuppi. But who knows? If Zuppi is the Pope, that would be. I would just say that there needs to be big pan-Orthodox unity efforts to take in more Roman Catholics, and I would even be willing to support an expanded Western Rite conversation and how to receive entire communities into the Western Rite if someone like Zuppi becomes the Pope, because that would there'd be a lot of people that would not be interested in standing for that. And that brings us to Cardinal Pizzaballa, moderate, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, advocates for peace in the Levant War, supports inter-Christian outreach. So this guy, he seems to be the one that maybe not who Taylor Marshall and these others want the most, but he seems to be the compromise candidate that traditionalists would be very willing to settle for. And that's because despite the fact that he's moderate, he's not necessarily super openly conservative. He seems to enjoy more traditional liturgics. He's dressed in a more traddy style in a lot of ways. Of course, he's not a Zionist. He supports the Palestinians, which is good. He, I believe, offered himself as a hostage or something in Gaza or something like that. But that's another thing. Everybody was posting about, Pope Francis. He saved the Holy Family monastery and church in Gaza. And I've always respected Pope Francis for his stance on Gaza, but everyone overlooks Patriarch Alexios of Gaza, who never left, who was always there. I saw some people saying that Pope Francis did more than any Orthodox leader. And yeah, he made a big show of calling the Catholics there every day. And I think because he's the Pope, it has more of an audience than a lot of Orthodox people that might have had an outsized influence. But the Orthodox clergy and the bishops, again, Bishop Alexios of Gaza, he did just as much as the Pope. He was there in Gaza. So in many ways, it was more than the Pope. But, Pizzaballa, obviously everyone thinks it's funny that we could have a guy named Pizzaballa as the Pope. But at the end of the day, he's very young. They've talked a lot about how he, again, if you elect some of these older guys, 70 plus, you're going to get at most maybe a 15, 20-year pontificate. If you elect Pizzaballa, who's in his 50s, you could have a 40-year pontificate on your hands. And that's something, again, the Vatican, it's very much a political institution at this point. They recognize, it's literally a nation state in the United Nations, which Roman Catholics obsessed with power make this sort of an argument for it in favor of it. But at the end of the day, this is not like a Christian see. This is a political office. This is at, a monarchical head of state who obviously operates jurisdiction over the largest, heretical Christian body in the world. But there's even so many examples of the conclave prove how silly the system is. Like canon law in the Catholic Church apparently says it's got to be 120 cardinals. John Paul II just increased the amount arbitrarily. And even as Taylor Marshall will admit, ultimately the actions of the Pope override all Catholic canon law. So it's like, this guy is just like an unencumbered despot. Like, it's like, I just don't understand. Like, I mean, so many examples through history as well. I mean, you have these anti-popes, you have Pope Julius, you have people doing orgies in the Vatican. I mean, it's just unfettered political power fused with episcopal power of this universal jurisdiction has completely I don't understand how they've stuck with it. It's just at the end of the day, I guess the power that it has amassed will always be something that draws people in despite obvious theological contradictions. But that's how these things go. Let's get a little bigger here. But yeah, a few other people on this list. You've got Cardinals Agic, Aborius, Ranjith have been suggested as potential candidates. I guess Ranjith, that's the Sri Lanka cardinal. Indian Pope, that would be subcontinental Pope. That would be crazy. I don't know if I could stop memeing on that. This is funny. Flayton says free calzone for everyone if he gets elected. Yeah, the pizza ballo, if he's the Pope, that's going to be a big victory. He's also Italian. Obviously, he's in Jerusalem, but he's another ethnic Italian. So a lot of these guys, I think, Pizzaballa, Zuppi, Parolin, these guys are Italian. So they've got an advantage for, again, I've made this point a million times. Roman Catholicism, people say like, oh, the Greek Orthodoxy is just Greek Christianity for everybody or Russian Christianity for everybody. Well, there's the Greek Orthodox Church, which is for Greeks. There's the Russian Orthodox Church for Russians. There's the Polish Orthodox Church for Poles, the Georgian Orthodox Church for Georgians. And what unites them? Orthodox Christianity. Whereas Roman Catholicism, fundamentally, what unites them is the Pope. You can go to Roman Catholic parishes that don't say the Filioque way. You can go to Roman Catholic parishes that have altar girls and female Eucharistic ministers. You can go to Roman Catholic parishes that will bless a homosexual couple engaged in sodomy. You'll go to other Roman Catholic parishes that mandate veiling and are super trad and do everything in Latin. You'll go to other Roman Catholic churches where they have a clown mass. I mean, these are all normal expressions that you can find in the world of Roman Catholicism. What unites them, of course, it is submission to the political figure that is the Bishop of Rome. And I saw Father James in the chat. He said, whoever calls himself the universal bishop or desires this title is, by his pride, the precursor of Antichrist, because he thus attempts to raise himself above the others, St. Gregory the Great. And that is very true. It's the reason in many ways, the geopolitical power that has been subsumed by the papacy is the reason we're even talking about it today, because even though it doesn't affect us ecclesiastically or ecclesiologically as Orthodox, it affects geopolitics. I mean, the Vatican Bank is a relevant institution when it comes to all sorts of financing of nefarious things going on, in the world. But I think the situation with yeah, this post made a good point at the end. I'll just read it before I put Telegram away. And now analysts suspect the next conclave will mainly be between Tagle and Erdo, with both representing their wings of the church. Nonetheless, Pizzaballa, in our opinion, could emerge as a compromise candidate. It's worth bearing in mind that anyone can be elected pope. This list is just a guide. John Paul II, when he went into the 1979 conclave as Archbishop Wojtyla of Krakow, was completely unknown outside Poland. So again, there's a solid chance that some guy we have never heard of becomes the pope. I mean, one of my favorite shows that's come out recently was The Young Pope with Jude Law, where basically there's a conservative and a very liberal who are kind of vying. And him, this very young 40-something-year-old cardinal, emerges as the sort of compromise candidate because they thought he'd be less traditional than the traditional guy, but not as liberal as the liberal guy. And it turns out he's like ultra reactionary and like makes the Smithsonian return the papal tiara. He makes every bishop kiss his feet in the Sistine Chapel. He bans people that have fornicated from entering the seminary, all sorts of things. I thought it was a good show, but it obviously shows that even in the media world, there's a sort of vaccination, a sort of inoculation of the average person against this idea of a super reactionary pope. Because, like, let's be real, there's a few things a pope could do to be more conservative, like unrestrict the Latin Mass, maybe turn back some of the homosexual stuff. But even then, people are going to realize the global nature of this church, of how many people in South America and how many nominal people in the West still claim to be Catholic, that would have a lot of problems with, some conservative coming in and returning to tradition. I think that would be something that people aren't realizing, that just as there are trads that get mad at everything Pope Francis does, there will be libtard Caths that get mad at everything a future-based pope, might do. But if anyone has any more questions, be sure to leave a super chat. It's always great to hear from everybody. Who do you think is going to be the next pope? I'm seeing a few funny ideas, of course, but I think I'm going to be generally keeping up with it. It's a relevant issue. It could even be relevant to World War III with how a future pope feels about the Middle East, feels about Israel. What if you get a more traditional pope? What if someone like Cardinal Sarah comes in, but they're actually, because their stance on migration, they're actually much more willing to not step in for Gaza and are willing to allow the Trump administration or the West to do more nonsense on behalf of Israel, escalate with Iran, escalate in Lebanon, all these sorts of things. So it's an interesting conversation. I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts on the Pope situation. Obviously, with Pope Francis's passing, the idea of the next ecumenical patriarch is on everybody's lips as well. Patriarch Bartholomew, I don't know if it's the longest serving, but he's one of the long. I'm sorry, my nose is super itchy, guys. I'm sorry, I'm not doing cocaine, but the idea, people talking about the next ecumenical patriarch, that's also something that's on people's minds. And obviously, I don't want Patriarch Bartholomew to die. I've heard he's got some illnesses. He's 84, 85, so not quite as old as Pope Francis, but he's been on the throne in the Fanar since 1991, and it's not been the best. So the problem with that is there's obviously the chance that we get Elpidophoros as the next patriarch. Felicia says Metropolitan Neophytos, which that would be amazing. Unfortunately, Metropolitan Neophytos is not on the Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarch. We know that in the past, the Greek churches have had more cross-pollination, of course, with what some people even like Patriarch, St. Nectarios. People wanted to make him the Patriarch of Alexandria. Some people, he was friends with the one that ended up becoming the EP. There was a lot more, I think, fellowship among these Greek bishops, but I think the best we could hope for is that Metropolitan Neophytos eventually, after what many have speculated would be a short episcopacy archbishopric from Archbishop Georgios in Cyprus, I think Metropolitan Neophytos taking over from him would be quite the miracle in and of itself. But who knows? Stranger things have happened, right? We've had some pretty amazing people rise to the ecumenical throne in Constantinople in the midst of sort of turmoil times in the church. One other thing about the Pope, there's, of course, I don't know all the details, there's supposed prophecy of Saint Malachi, which I think is a post-schism saint, so not making a comment on that, but supposedly the Pope Francis was the 111th Pope after this prophecy, which the prophecy says that after 111 popes, there won't be any more popes. So I don't know maybe World War III will break out before day one of the conclave, and it'll get so heavy that full sedevacantism becomes real. Like, there's a tendency that I've been thinking this as well. They say, from what I heard, it's likely the next ecumenical patriarch will be Archbishop Emmanuel, who's essentially like a Bartholomew 2.0. We got to hope that doesn't happen, man. You got to pray against that. I've heard Archbishop Emmanuel would be worse than Elpidophoros. Like, everything I've read, he would literally, you would rather have Elpidophoros than Archbishop Emmanuel. So we got to hope that doesn't happen. There's 2 bishops on the synod that are not bad, I think. That also are Turkish citizens. So that's the other thing, is to become the Patriarch of Constantinople, you have to be a Turkish citizen. So there are a lot of bishops in the Greek world that unfortunately are not eligible, I think Metropolitan Neophytos included, because they are not Turkish citizens or citizens of the Republic of Turkey, which, obviously I don't believe that should be a thing. You shouldn't have to be a citizen of some Islamic country to be the patriarch, but the Fenar, the patriarchate, is within Turkish territory, and I'm pretty sure the Turks don't even like him being called the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Like, they consider that like Greek revanchism, even calling himself the EP. So, what Zach says, he thinks Elpidophoros has pissed too many people off to be considered to be the patriarch, which is true. However, I had predicted that he was likely going to be removed as Archbishop of America because apparently Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the prime minister of Greece, was trying to get that to happen after the gay baptism, after these other things. We know Elpidophoros was trying to strip the metropolitan bishops of the United States of their titular titles. The Antiochian Archdiocese of America, for example, has one metropolitan, and all the other bishops are vicar bishops in their diocese, meaning they have a lot less power and laterality. Whereas in the Greek church, they have full-on metropolitans like Metropolitan Constantine of Denver, who would be my bishop if I was in the Greek church. They are, they're much more empowered, but he was trying to kind of amass power for himself. And that was sort of thwarted by some Greek politicking, but Elpidophoros was able to slip out, sort of emerge unscathed. So we have to, look, he's a politician. He's a great politician at that. He was talking about canonizing Elder Ephraim recently, obviously to win favor among more traditional Greeks, especially Greeks that are more traditional that aren't really paying attention to all of this church politics stuff. I see people talking about Prophecies, St. Paisios. Who was it that said, let me go back up. Somebody said something about, is there a book with all the prophecies? Let me try to find this. Yeah, Zach says, I would love a central location of all these holy prophecies compiled together in one spot. Well, the Eschaton Vigil, who, if they're listening to this, we would love to collaborate. I've been in touch. The Eschaton Vigil has a lot of this stuff. I just ordered a book from the Eschaton Vigil with all of St. Paisios' World War III, at least a lot of the known ones, all of St. Paisios' World War III prophecies in one place. So if you're interested in that, visit the eschatonvigil.com.org. I can't remember the exact thing, but you can just Google the Eschaton Vigil, click the website, and there's a lot of books. Of course, that's where I got this book, which we'll be having a new version coming out soon, the Eschatological Visions of the Blessed. There's now the new St. Paisios book that I have on the way, including shipping. It was like $20, so not bad. And yeah, so again, I'd love to work with the Eschaton Vigil. This book, for example, has some translation errors and I think some sourcing errors. Not critiquing, love what he's doing, but I would actually love to be a bit more privy to the process because I take the sourcing on these things pretty seriously. You're not going to catch me. Look, I've referenced things that aren't well sourced and explicitly said these aren't super well sourced, but when it comes to talking about St. Paisios and Elder Ephraim, I mostly only say things that are either from verified publications that people like Metropolitan Neophytos have verified, or spiritual children of St. Paisios and Elder Ephraim themselves, who I've had the blessing of speaking to, thank God. But we've got another super chat here from John D. Rock, $5. Thank you. Cannot express how much I appreciate the super chats, everybody. How much is the Vatican in bed with Israel? France's support for Gaza seems no more than the same lip service U.S. Democrat congressmen give. No, look, I don't think that Pope Francis is like J-woke, okay? He literally put a statue of poor refugees with their suitcases in their little throng in St. Peter's Square, and the leader of the pack of migrants is a full-on Hasidim. So I don't think that Pope Francis gets it. But look, he called that Catholic Church in Gaza every day, literally every day, to the point where the Jews knew that if they bombed it, Pope Francis would be like, why did you bomb the Catholic Church? So I give him credit. I give him credit where credit is due. Probably saved some Christians' lives. That being said, Pope Francis gives communion to Jews. This is one of the most scandalous stories I always bring up to Roman Catholics. It's Pope Francis was at some old person thing. I was giving out communion. He gives communion to an old lady, and the old lady says, I'm Jewish, which, as far as I can tell, if an old lady takes communion in any capacity, and then immediately says to the cleric giving it to them that they're Jewish, they're obviously like messing with you. Like, they're obviously like, ha ha, I'm a Jew. Like, you just broke your own rules. And I think the situation with then he went on to say, so is what I gave you. It's what he said. So is what I gave you, saying like basically, yes, so is Jesus. Jesus is a Jew, which like, okay, we don't need to get into the semantics of that. But I think the reality with Pope Francis on that, again, I think insofar as he's a progressive, he stands with Palestine, right? I think insofar as he's just a Christian in some capacity, again, not saying they're Orthodox, not saying they're the true church, not saying he's saved, anything like that. But obviously, I think from a basic, even just an optics perspective, he's like, look, I got to oppose genocide. I got to oppose war. I got to be in favor of peace. But at the end of the day, between the Vatican Bank and how they've been financed between Freemasons and these other Italian banking families, there's definitely Jewish fingers all in there. I mean, Catholic charities in the United States, very Jewish. Some have even non-Catholic Jews running some of these things. So, yeah, I don't think that there's, I think the Zionists very much are in the Vatican. I think the only way that the Vatican might be going against, Netanyahu's interests is because of progressive politics. It says, Conrad, I was just given a soon to be released book of prophecies, which will be the definitive volume on this. Is that from Eschaton Vigil? Or is it from someone else? I'd love to know more. But now we've been going for an hour 15. Should I play some Ethno Guesser? If there's anything anyone wants me to talk about, send a super chat. If not, I might hop into some Ethno Guesser and we can yap while we play that. Father James C. said, the great Christian empire is long since dead, the ecumenical nature of the church. Well, I wouldn't say long since dead. I would say the Christian empire died in 1918 when Tsar Martyr Nicholas II was killed and the Russian Empire, Third Rome, was overthrown by Jewish Bolsheviks. But in many ways, I still believe that's why this timing of the prophecies, just over 100 years after the anniversary of that, I think that the idea of a sort of 100-year, 150-year kind of exile before the return of whether it be the Marble King, whether it be a Tsar, whether the Tsar will be the Marble King, whether the Marble King and the Tsar will work together, whether there will be a briefly short-lived Tsar. It says, no, the prophecy book is by Christos Romanus at Christos Media. Please send me some details about this, man. I would love to... I don't know if this person has a Father Peter Here's avatar, but I'm pretty sure Father Peter is this just Father Peter that I'm talking to right now? Maybe it is. But I would love to hear more about that. I would love to hear the details about that. And this is Father Peter. I'm sorry, Father. It just says PAH. Papa hears, I guess. But hello to Father Peter. Father Peter in chat. This is amazing. And we got Jonathan Kelly. Shut up and take my money. I love a good Futurama reference. I'm a Fry respecter. So thank you, Jonathan. Cannot express how much I appreciate it. But with Father Peter talking, again, Father bless Christos Anesti. Thank you, Father. He says that he got this book at St. Anthony's. Maybe this is something that you can come on for another episode of Ether Hour and we can discuss this book, especially if maybe it's still in Greek. I don't know all the details, but that is something that I would love to read, especially if it's from a Greek source that's prime, especially a Greek source that appreciates their Russian connections. So love to see Father Peter in the chat. It's amazing to see. Got a great crowd tonight. Greatly appreciate it. But yeah, I think Orthodox Centurion says you could briefly cover the developments in the Metcalf situation. Maybe I'll talk about that when I get the Ethno Guesser going. But yeah, I think Father Peter says it's translated into English, a work of over 8 years of research. Well, you heard it here first, folks, here on World War Live. Greatly appreciated. And I think I'm going to be doing whatever I can to get that book as fast as possible. And I think even, sooner than that, maybe we'll have to have Father Peter on for another discussion, one of my favorite people to talk to. So really, I don't even need a reason to talk to Father Peter, but, that's a great reason. Jonathan Kelly, Christ is risen, brothers. Indeed, he is risen. Oh, we've got the shekels coming in. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. You are keeping the momentum going. You're keeping the lights on here. You're keeping the studio, which is totally not my bedroom, you're keeping it going. So greatly appreciate it. And thank you, Father. Let it be blessed indeed. So true. I still love doing the stream, guys. I was nervous about starting this on Tuesday evenings. I only got 3 weeks in before having to take a break, but this is really good stuff. I really enjoy coming here and streaming with everybody. It's a really good time. But let's get some screen share going over here. Hold on. No, let's remove this. And let's get another thing going. Boom, bing, bam. All right, we're back. Alan Wong will donate $10 for every perfect guess on Ethno Guesser. Oh boy. The the pressure's on. All right. Let's see what we're doing here. Hold on. I'm going to have to I got to restart this. I got to reload this page. Hold on. All right. Let's do the daily. All right, we're locked in. I guess before I start this, there's not a timer on this, is there? No, I got my time. Someone said for me to update the Austin Metcalf situation. I'm not going to get as spicy as I did last time, but it escalated exactly how I thought it would, right? I mean, Carmelo Anthony's family's raised over $500,000. They bought an Escalade. I think Carmelo Anthony bought new Jordans. There was the whole press conference situation where Jeff Metcalf, Austin Metcalf's father, showed up and was kicked out. They said his actions speak louder than his words, despite the fact that his words were absolute forgiveness and groveling at the feet of these black murderers. Apparently that wasn't enough. Him showing up, I guess, to show solidarity. I don't know what that goober was thinking, but that was not enough for them. They realized, I mean, just reading the comments on the GoFundMe, it's like Carmelo Anthony's the next Rosa Parks. That white boy got what he deserved. These sorts of things. These are just things that if you're a white American, you got to internalize. You got to pray for the whole situation, obviously. But this is one of those things that I heard Matt Walsh, other people speculating that, let's say Carmelo gets convicted of murder and has the book thrown at him, that they're going to riot. Maybe they will. I don't necessarily think so. But if they do, I don't think that's going to be good for the BLM crowd. That's only going to serve to radically and dramatically radicalize white Americans on the other side. So that's my perspective. Again, Scott Greer's talked about this. I think Scott Greer's latest article, Black Tribalism, talks about this in a pretty prescient way. And again, it's all going to come down to the race of the jury. And I think everybody, if you can look at jury bias statistics, specifically black female jurors pretty much always side with black, especially black male victims. So that's my perspective on there. Going to dive into Ethno Guesser here. Okay. We got some Asians, it would seem, I think. I don't know if they're East Asian enough to, I don't know if they're East Asian enough for me to go like China, Japan, but I'm not getting Indo-Chinese either. I'm not feeling Filipino. Dagestan? I don't know, man. They look a little too east for that. Maybe Kyrgyzstan. That's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Kyrgyz. They're the most Chinese-looking Central Asians that I know about. Dang it. These were like Sami people from freaking Finland. Yeah, see, Northern Lapid variety, somewhat closer to Sibrid, possibly due to Samoyedic influence associated with Eastern Sami. Yep, Sami people. That's right out the gate, man, with the Sami. That is a deep cut. That is a deep cut. Not that I'm unfamiliar, but not a hedged for sure. Okay. I'm definitely not Hispanic. I'm feeling Middle Eastern for sure. think Arab in some capacity. Maybe not Pakistan or anything like that, but I'm almost sensing like Iraq, Jordan, maybe. I'm totally not cheating by waiting for the smart people in chat to help me out here, but I really think Iraq, maybe, I mean, these could be Kurds, maybe. Maybe Iraqi Kurdistan? Maybe that's what we'll go with. Oh, these are Yemenis, Yemenids. So they're Orientalid subtype that deviates in an Armenoid direction, most common in South and Central Yemeni. So again, I'm getting above average scores here, but yeah, see, medium brown skin, wavy, sometimes curly black hair, rather short. Long history of admixture with Sudanese Arabs. All right. The more you know. Not Kurds, though. Okay. Now these are Africans, but why does the guy on the left looks way too much like Martin Luther King for me to not have to consider? Yeah, he said, is this the Houthi race, Yemenid? I think it is the Houthi race, specifically because the Houthis are on the Red Sea part of Yemen and would have admixture with Sudanese Arabs. So makes a lot of sense. But does this guy not look like Martin Luther King? Like, yeah, good idea, Liberian. I think I think Liberia is a good guess. I was gonna guess West Africa. I think with the MLK connection. Let's go here. Oh, Sudan, Middle Nile. Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. These people even Bantu? My goodness. I'm losing it, guys. Middle Nile. Features are variable, although North African, West Asian, and Sub-Saharan elements have a long history of contact in the region. In difference to the North Ethiopian Nubians of the region, it is characterized by a combination of Sudanid and Orientalid. Not my proudest moment, guys. Unfortunate. I apologize. Okay. Oh boy. You can't tell how tall they are, so I can't say pygmy. They kind of have pygmy look to them, though. Or are these just like deep Amazonian natives? Or are these more like Japanese pre-Japanese people? Yeah, they got the Asian look. That's the thing. I can't. They look too Asian for me to. Yeah, like why are they like black or Chinese? I don't know. It's like both. I have no idea what to do here. Maybe this could be like a Myanmar subgroup, like a Rohingya or something like that. Could these be Rohingya? I don't know. Khoisan, Southern Africa. Okay, that makes sense. That makes some sense. Maybe even someone on Madagascar. I'm gonna guess the west coast of South Africa. Okay, let's go. Khoisanid. Gotta give a shout out to the Orthodox perspective here. He got that one. And GSP came in right before I got it too. I think he did it, but gotta thank the chat for the collaborative dub here. Look, it's tough. I've only met people involved in the junta, and the junta are a Buddhist, almost entirely dominated by a Buddhist ethnic group that isn't nice to the other ethnic groups. So I'm not I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I would like to go to Myanmar though, even though it seems like really dangerous and out there and racked with earthquakes. But that's that. Let's move on here. Oh boy. Oh boy. Why does the dude look so funny? Why does he look so wacky? Why does he look so simian? What is this? It's like North Sudan. No, these are gonna be Pacificos. These are probably some Papuans again. I've been right on Papua before. What are people saying? Indonesia, Borneo, New Guinea. Okay, I think this is a safe Papua. Yep, it's a perfect score, baby. It's a perfect score. I knew it was. I checked it before I checked chat. I knew that was. I knew those were going to be Papuans before I had chat agree. Yeah, that's true. They could have been Fijians. 100%. All right, we're 5 out of 10. How are we doing overall? We're doing pretty well, I think. Oh, this guy looks like wah, 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 wah. This guy looks like one of those. It's very Asian, but the question is where? Because this is a big landmass. Is he like Navajo Nation? Is he Canadian Plains? Maybe he's on the border with Alaska. You know what? I'm going for broke on South Dakota. All right. Let's go, baby. Didn't even have another cursor. That's right. And I don't even know that much about Native Americans. I have been to the res. I have been to the Navajo Nation. Man, does that place suck. Holy moly. I don't know how many people in chat have been to the Navajo Nation. It's not. It's bleak, man. It is bleak. Shiprock, New Mexico. Let me tell you, man. And it's a beautiful landscape. Center of Monument Valley. It's called Shiprock because there's this huge sentinel rock called the Shiprock, and it looks like a boat, like this huge ship just stuck, of course, but you almost can your mind can play a trick on you that it's like going through the ocean, like the ocean of the desert of the sands, like a ship. But man, did that town suck. I have never been in there's only one place in this whole United States that I've been that felt to me as bleak as Shiprock, New Mexico, and that was West Memphis, near the border with Arkansas. Some bleak parts of this country, man. Shiprock, we stopped there to get gas because we were almost out of gas. This is during COVID. I was skiing with my dad and brothers when COVID happened and the resorts all shut down. So instead of just chilling there doing nothing, we did a road trip through Utah, New Mexico. We went to all the national parks and these sorts of things. And we stopped in Shiprock to get gas. And my goodness, was that a bleak place. I got out of the car to get something to drink, I think, in the gas station, and the convenience store was boarded up. There was nothing happening. The pumps were running, and we were right next to a bingo hall, which I figured out was a bingo hall because the sign that said bingo hall was like shot out, had been like burned down. Someone had set it on fire. And in the parking lot, I could see people inside playing bingo, though. So I knew it was a bingo hall. In the parking lot, there were probably 7 feather Indians just planking, like just laying on their backs or stomachs in the parking lot, just off the fire water, just hallucinating their buns off. And we got gas, and I'd kind of walked a few yards away to see what's going on, and I walked right back. I was like, we got to get out of here. Like when we fill this up, we're not eating here, we're not getting food, we got to get out of here. And we got out of there. But the crazy thing about the res is, oh my gosh, like Shiprock was like the kind of town in that area. I remember there was a little settlement like 45 minutes outside of Shiprock. There was no other town for another like 2 hours the opposite direction. And there was all these settlements. I could tell people had dirt floors, and there were like, I could tell at least 150, 200 people lived in these little settlements. They're like 10 cars, like 7, 8, 9, 10 cars. So there are people out there on the res that like they don't leave their little teepee, like they don't leave their little thing. Like they literally they'll walk through the desert, some of them, before they get a car into town. So it's cursed land, unfortunately, and a lot of them still look. There's still a lot of Satanist pagan stuff on the res, and there's Christians. The best res I ever went to was the Black Crow Reservation in Montana. I drove through it when I moved to Idaho, and I drove up from Texas, and they have a huge sign that says "Christ is King of the Black Crow Reservation," and it was much nicer. They had more modern housing developments. Their people actually mostly lived in normal looking houses. They seemed to kind of be interested in assimilating into Christian American culture. So I thought that reservation, it's still bleak. I'm sorry. The reservations are just bleak. It doesn't matter how many handouts they give these people living on the casino land, off the fire water, off the tobacco money. Is just not as good as integrating into white American society. And again, even the best reservations I saw, they're not exactly places you want to live. But that's my autism on Native Americans. But let's move on. Now these are East Asians right here. These people have an average IQ of 108. The lady almost looks like she could be from down here, maybe Cantonese or something. But what do I know, right? Are these Koreans? Are the why am I getting notifications? Do not disturb. 1 more hour. I'll be wrapping up soon. Yeah. I think what is it? Paisio says Conrad is going to live in Cyprus. Maybe. If I had to live in an EU country, Cyprus is definitely up there. I like it. It's a beautiful place. And I like the monasteries there. But man, I don't want to get this one wrong, but these are obviously, far Orientals. He doesn't look like the Chinese guy I got last time though. So I'm not sure. Japanese. I'm going down here. Dang it. He's a Kazakh. No. I knew the woman looked too not high IQ. I don't know. This one's not. That was a little embarrassing. Now, the guy totally looks like a Kazakh too. Very Asian looking Kazakh, but yeah, I should have. West Tungid variety, an Aralid of the vast Central Asian steppes. I'm slacking. Okay. Something akin to a white man. Not really, though. The nose gives it a bit away. Are these... Man, the woman throws me off on this one. Are these like light-skinned Central and South Americans? Portuguese? Could they be like Iranians? Could they be Brazil? The woman makes me think Brazil, but the man makes me think Persia. But I'm feeling South America here. I even thought of the Azores in Portugal. Did I not? Run it back. I said that. I said Portugal. SMH. I mean, come on. Brazil, it's kind of a part of the whole thing. It's kind of a part of that whole thing they had going on there. Well, let's move on. Oh boy. Okay, why this guy on the left look a little like Myron Gaines? That alone makes me want to pick Sudan. But I think these could be subcontinentals as well. The guy looks like Myron, okay? So Sudan might just be the pick for the meme. But I'm checking the chat. Sudan or the subcontinent? What are we thinking here? What are we thinking? Because the woman looks Indian as hell, but the guy looks like Myron. Ethiopia. People got saying Pakistan. I'll go Pakistan, but if they're East African, I'm going to be disappointed. What? Libyans? Algerians? Yeah, this is a, my grandfather used to buy or sell them. Of course I know them. This is one of those moments. Dang. All right. Let's forget about that. 10 out of 10. Last one here. All right. That's a peace pipe passer if I've ever seen one. But the question is he Alaskan? This could get into Russian territory here. But they do look like Native Americans. People are saying Morocco, Guatemala. No. These are too Asian for Guatemala. This is going to be, these are going to be in America, I think, or Canada. I think I'm going to go up here again. Dang it. Fairly close, but you scored an average of 2,032 over 10 rounds. 2 perfect rounds. Yeah, I should have known this. I should have guessed closer to the res, because this is Navajo Nation right here. These are Arizonids, relatively recent North American contact type, started to develop as Athabaskan speakers of Canada, migrated south during late pre-Columbian period. All right. This is good. I like ending the streams this way. It's fun. It isn't gonna do many favors in the media, but who cares, right? Speaking of the media, I was supposed to do an interview today with the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. They booked a studio and everything. It was going to be audio only, I guess. And they've already talked to a few other Orthodox people in Texas, but I was supposed to talk to them today. I'm probably going to be included in the piece, much like I was included in the Texas Monthly Hit piece, despite not agreeing to an interview. But I prayed about it, I thought about it, and I realized there was no reason to do the interview. They were, look, the piece. I mean, I don't care if I blow up their spot. I was proud. I was not ashamed to have wasted their journalistic time and resources. The BBC is propaganda. So I didn't feel bad canceling on them a few hours before the interview, which I did. But the piece they told me the working title was Russia's Church in Texas. And that pretty much told me all I needed to know, that there was going to be another Texas Monthly style piece meant to basically do stochastic terrorism against the Orthodox Church, specifically in Texas, and gin up this nonsense about how Orthodoxy in America is a Russian tool of soft power. And the producers know I went to Russia. They're going to try to paint me as some Russian agent or something like that. And I'm sure, maybe now that I wasted their time and didn't do their interview, they might go harder on me. They might say more unflattering quotes of me. They might directly accuse me of being on the payroll of somebody. But of course, you guys, I'm not on the payroll. I'm not on anybody's payroll except the World War Now subscribers. So if you want to grease my palms, have a say in the editorial stance of the show, just become a paid subscriber. If you message me, I have to listen to you, right? That's sort of how it works. It's not to say if you're an insane person, I won't happily return your money and send you on your way, but I am happy to hear feedback, especially from people that have financially invested in the show. Much like Alan Wong, $25 says, very good, sir. Thank you, Alan, our strongest Han soldier. Look, we've got a lot of Hans in the audience, but it's hard to say that there's a stronger Han warrior than Alan. So anyone else wants to step up and do as much, maybe they can take that seat. But as of now, Alan is the, again, if I ever have the ear of St. John Vitatsis as he rules his kingdom, if he rules the Orthodox world, I would nominate Alan as envoy to the Orient as of right now. If you want to be the envoy somewhere, you can become a supporter too. But yeah, I think the BBC situation, look, I recognize that all publicity is good publicity in some capacity. I recognize that these legacy media institutions have been refuted in a lot of ways. And I even recognize that the Texas Monthly piece written by a former affiliate of mine, someone I knew from college, I think it ultimately helped. Like, it was ridiculous calling Father John Whiteford like a czarist, neo-Confederate. It was absurd. But at the same time, there are Orthodox people, unfortunately, in positions of power in the Orthodox Church that read mainstream media. And I think that's the main thing to be careful of, is I don't need to be, especially, look, I say controversial things. I never claim to speak for the Orthodox Church. And it seemed that they were kind of trying to paint it in that light, as if I'm somehow some really big representative of institutional Orthodox Christianity, which I'm not. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I'm involved in my church. I like to think that I keep my ear to the ground of what's going on in Orthodoxy in America and around the world. I'm an Orthodox journalist. I mean, look, I have a degree in media culture and the arts with a focus in journalism, with my classes in my journalism focus largely being about religious journalism. I took multiple courses on world religious journalism from a conservative Christian institution. So I cover those things. I'm not a priest. I'm not a bishop. I'm not a seminarian. I'm not even, I don't know, I'm not a spokesperson for any diocese, archdiocese, bishop, parish, anything like that. I'm just a guy. I'm just a journalist with a degree who I guess is decent enough at yapping into a can like this. And so I didn't need, they'd already interviewed some people with I very much respect for this BBC piece, and I didn't need them to be affiliated with everything that I say or every quote that they may inject into this article. And maybe they'll do that anyway, right? They mostly focus on ROCOR people. I think they like me because I'm in a different Orthodox jurisdiction, and they like to paint this as a Orthodox-wide phenomenon. So we'll see how it goes. They're probably very disappointed in me for wasting like a week of their time planning this interview and then canceling on them, but I don't care. We'll see. If they mention me and they mention the show, God bless them. Hopefully it leads to some people to click and listen to the show. But if nobody else has any super chats, I'm going to wrap this up here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be filming an Ether Hour episode with Dimitri. We're hoping to get a guest on, perhaps a Catholic, to talk more about papal politics. Get into that. Of course, it's sort of the subject of the week, but if that doesn't work out, we'll have something different to talk about. So pray that we can come up with a good show, because we have all sorts of options that are always in the back catalog, but we are going to be deciding that very soon. But Zach says, Christ is risen. Indeed, he is risen. Yes, indeed, Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs, bestowing life. So I hope everybody's enjoyed their Pascha. I hope everyone's enjoying Bright Week and the feasting, and is very much basking in the joy of the resurrection as we now march towards Pentecost and the descent of the Holy Spirit. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm going to get the lobby going here, worldwarnow.co. That's where you can become a supporter. Like the video. Please like the stream. It really helps us out. I'm going to also remember to upload the recording to Substack this time. I waited like 2 or 3 days last time, and I'd already uploaded Ether Hour. So for better or for worse, episode 3 of World War Live is only available on YouTube in all of its controversial glory. This one, hopefully, I'm not going to drop the ball, and I will upload it to Substack as well. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and Christ is risen. Sorry.